So hi, I'm Gene Trowbridge with Trowbridge Law Group, and I'm here to talk about this question that I got from a client of mine who called, and the client is doing a historic rehab in a Midwest city on a property that I would call infamous because of its name and its history, and the press has decided that this is a newsworthy project, and the press wants to come interview and then write articles about it. And my client is saying, oh my gosh, I know I can't advertise. I can't have advertising. I don't want to screw up and violate the law. But can this third party advertise for me? And so that's the question. And I've got three scenarios that might have different answers you might be interested in that I'm going to talk about in this. And the first thing I need to do is I need to place you in the fact that we're talking about securities. Here we have an investment with a bunch of investors investing in this building. The manager is going to make it all happen. And the manager is bringing an offering to the public under Regulation D, which allows his offering to be exempt from SEC registration. Every security has to be registered with the SEC unless it's exempt. And if you blow your exemption, according to whatever the rules are on your exemption, then you will be accused of selling an unregistered security. So it's important not to blow your exemption and follow the rules of Regulation D. And what we're talking about here is the rule on advertising and solicitation. And so we have two types of offerings in Regulation D. We have a 506B and a 506C. And while well over 90% of the money is raised in 506B, and just as an aside, that's a lot of money. In the last 12 months, the SEC said that in Regulation D, the Form Ds that were filed represent about $1.8 trillion. It's a lot of money. And only about a third of that, or even less, is of real estate. But this is where capital formation happens in the United States. That $1.8 trillion during that same period of time was 3 times the amount raised in IPOs on the stock exchange. So this is big money. So over 90% of the money is raised in 506B, and the rest of it is raised in 506C. And let's see what 506C says. No limit on how much you raise. You can have as many accredited investors you want. Because you don't know who the investors are, you have to take steps to be reasonably assured before they invest. Now, you can't stop advertising. I mean, advertising goes anywhere. You can't regulate who sees your ads. But if you're doing 506C, the regulation is on your part to make sure that only accredited investors invest with you. No sophisticated investors, because it's riskier. If we're just simply advertising and asking people to send us $50,000 checks, that's a little more risky than if you know the investors and they know you. PPM is recommended, and advertising and general solicitation is allowed. So first of all, if this client had called me and he was in the habit of doing 506C offerings where he can advertise, he probably wouldn't have called me to ask me the question. He probably would have called to brag that this was such a cool thing that the local press wanted to write a story about it. But this client happens to do 506B offerings where you can raise as much money as you want, as many accredited investors, and all they have to do is check the box that they're accredited because you know them, you have a pre-existing relationship. You'd know if someone was checking the box and you didn't think they were telling the truth. Investors self-certify, that's what I mean by checking the box, and enable to promote capital formation. You can take 35 investors that aren't accredited. In 506B, you can't do any advertising. No advertising and no solicitation. The investors who invest with you are people with whom you have a pre-existing relationship, meaning you knew them before your offering came out, and it's a substantive relationship. It's not just having their name in in your database. And somewhere else in this YouTube channel, we have a YouTube called 3 Words. And the 3 words we talk about are sophisticated, pre-existing, and substantive. And that would be a good one to watch if you want a little more background on the prohibition of advertising. So anyhow, the client called and said they want to come and they want to write a story about the project. Well, the answer to his question goes to what does the SEC say about advertising and solicitation. And the SEC really has 2 rules on advertising. And the first rule is, or for questions anyhow, is the communication in question a general solicitation or general advertisement? And 2, if it is it being used by the issuer or someone on the issuer's behalf to offer or sell the securities? If either question can be answered in the negative, the issuer will not be in violation of the prohibition of advertising. So here comes the press. They're going to write an article. They're going to talk about the project. Well, I guess that kind of begs the question, is that solicitation or advertising? No, the article is to talk about the project. And is the article going to be used by the people in the press, the sponsor, to offer or sell securities? I don't think so. I think we have to have a discussion with the writers of the article and lay out some groundwork of what you can say and what you can't say. But to tell the people about how this historic building is going to be brought back to life and the purpose it's going to serve is a great story in itself, without talking about how much money are we raising and what's the minimum investment and is it 506B or C. You don't need any of that stuff. It's a real estate general interest story for the community. And we talked about that, and we decided that, yes, in this case, the third party could write an article about the building and tell people about it. Now, probably my client's name's going to be in the article, and if people call my client, well, so be it. The purpose of that wasn't to sell or solicit new investors or investors for that project. So in that case, that's one answer. And these answers I'm giving you really come from no action letters that I've read over the past. And what a no action letter is someone would write to the SEC and say, hey, if I do this or if this happens, I'm a little concerned that you might not like it. So if I do what I say, will you send me a letter ahead of time and tell me that you will not take any action? So what I'm asking for is a no action letter from you. Okay. So here's 2 other situations that fall right into this. At one time, there was a magazine, a financial magazine publisher. And what he did is he went to sponsors of syndications and told the sponsors that he would write an article and place it in his magazine to tell the public about their offerings. And what would he do? He'd go to the SEC and he'd find Form Ds that have been filed that tell you who the sponsors are. And then he would go to these people and he would interview them. And if they wanted an article, he would charge them. He would charge them for the article, and they put it in the magazine, and it would talk about his the client's offerings. And when that person went to the SEC to get an answer on that, the SEC said, no, the sponsor is actually paying for the advertisement to be put in the magazine for the purpose of finding investors. In a 506B, you can't do that. 506C, sure, but in 506B, you can't. So if your sponsors are doing, or if you're doing nothing but 506B offerings, I wouldn't advise you to do that. But at the same time, another editor of a financial magazine did this. He went to the SEC website and grabbed particular information off of the Form Ds, and without discussing it with the sponsor, just simply printed the information from the Form Ds. And he circulated that to registered representatives and financial planners who subscribed to his magazine because they wanted to be aware of offerings that came out. And you know, those financial planners and registered reps, they have the clients. They have relations with the clients. They just don't know what offerings are out there. And because this publisher just simply took public record information, put it in a real tombstone format in the magazine, and the subscribers to the magazines paid, they would know a little bit about offerings. They could contact the sponsor, they could find the information, and then they could talk to their clients with whom they had a pre-existing and substantive relationship. The SEC said, fine, it's not advertising, it's printing public information, and it's not being used by the sponsor of the offering to find investors. And so in that case, that was fine. So if it's really a newsworthy project, and not all of you are in that, but some of us see that. If it's really a newsworthy project and they're just going to talk about the news of the real estate and what's happening, that would be fine. If someone comes to you and says, do a write-up for me of your project and I'll put it in my magazine or I'll put it on my website or whatever and promote it for you, no, that's not good. And if it's just someone else who's taking public information and putting it in a magazine and putting it to other people who have investors who might invest in your offering. And you know, that's when I was a syndicator, I raised all my money through the broker dealer community, and they have plenty of investors. They know the investors. All they need to know is your product. You tell the financial planner or the registered rep about your product. You give them a couple copies of the private placement memorandum. They read it. If it makes sense, they go and sell it to their clients with whom they have a pre-existing and substantive relationship, and it works just fine. So that's the answer to the question. Can I work with third-party advertising in my syndication offerings? So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, you can maybe get some of them answered by taking up my offer. If you scan that QR code, you'll be asked for your email address. If you put your email address in there, I will send you a free PDF of the 4th edition of my book, It's a Whole New Business, which is a book just on syndication. And I'd be glad to have you have that PDF. You can always buy the hard copy at Amazon. And I even have an audio copy. If you went to Amazon and look at audiobooks under my name, you'd find that I narrated that book and told some stories during the narration. Kind of interesting. So let's see. Here's how you get a hold of us. There's a phone number, our website, and of course our YouTube channel. So don't turn off before you subscribe. And this is Gene Trowbridge saying thanks.